Snowball will now read. Wow, Snowball's losing his voice. Snowball's reading a lot of books. Final lesson. Just ignore that stolen symbol over there. The final lesson by Agrothus Goth. You know, the guy you kill in The Sims. It is time for you to leave your apprenticeship here, said the great sage to his students, Taxem and Volgodak. So soon, cried Volgodak, for it had been but a few years since the training began. Are we such poor pupils? What have we learned much for? We have learned much for you, master, but you have no more to teach us, Taxem asked. You have told us so many tales of great enchanters of the past. Can't we continue to learn until we have reached some level of their power? I have one last story for you, smiled the great sage. Many thousands of years ago, long before the Cyrodiilic dynasty, apparently this does continue from Feyfolken, of Remain, and even longer before the Septim dynasty ruled Tamriel, and before there was a mages guild, and when the land called Morrowind was known as Resdian, and the land of elsewhere was called Aniquina. And Palantine, and the only law of the land was the cruel ways of the Elysian doctrines of Maruka. There lived a hermetic enchanter named Dalek, who had two apprentices, Ulthrak and Lorith. Just insert your own joke there with Dalek. Hey, Ulthrak and Lorith were remarkable students, both equally assiduous in their learning. Assiduous, okay. The pride of their master. Both excelled at the arts of the cauldron, mirror castings, the infusion of spiritus into mundus, and the weaving of air and fire. Dalek was very fond of his boys, and they of him, except he wanted to exterminate. On a springtide morn, Dalek received a message from another enchanter named Peothil. Yeah, no one's going to joke about that. Who lived deep in the forest of the Kolovanian heartland. You must remember that in the dark days of the First Era, mages were solitary practitioners, with only organized consortium being the Sigics of Artium. Away from that island, mages seldom saw one another, and even more rarely corresponded. Thus, when Dalek received Peothil's letter, he gave it his great attention. Peothil was greatly aged, and he had found the peace of his isolation threatened by Elysian reform. Excuse me. He feared for his life, knowing that the fanatical priests and their warriors were close at hand. Dalek brought his students to him. It will be an arduous and perilous journey to Kolovanian estates, one that I would fear partaking even in my youth, Dalek said. My heart trembles to send you two forth to Peothil's cave, but I know that he is a great and benevolent enchanter, and his light must continue to burn in the heart of the continent, if we are to survive these dark nights. Ulthrak and Lorith pled with their teacher not to order them to go to Peothil. It was not the priests and warriors of the Elysian reform they feared, but they knew their master was aged and infirm, and could not protect himself. if the reform moved further westward. Finally, he relented and allowed that one would stay with him and the other would journey forth to the Colovian estate. He would let them decide which of them would go. The lads debated and discussed, fought and compromised, and at last elected to let fate make the choice. They threw lots. Lorith came up short. He left early the next morning, miserable and filled with fear. For a month and a day he tramped through the forests, into the midst of the Colovanian estate. Through some planning, some skill, and much assistance for sympathetic peasants, he managed to avoid the ever-tightening circle of the Elysian reform by crossing through unclaimed mountain passes and hidden bogs. When at last he found the dark caverns where Dalek had told him to search for Peothil, it was still many hours before he could find the enchanter's lair. No one appeared to be there. Lorith searched through the laboratory of ancient tomes, cauldrons, and crystalline flutes. Herbs kept alive by the glow of mystic circles. Strange liquids and gases caught in transparent membranes. At last he found Peothil, or so he presumed. The desiccated shell on the floor of the study, clutching tools of enchantment, scarcely seemed human. Lorith decided that he could do nothing further for the mage and began at once the journey back to his true master Dalek and his friend Uthrak. The armies of reform had moved quickly since he passed. After more than one close near encounter, the young enchanter realized that he was trapped on all sides. The only retreat that was possible was back in the cave of Peothil. The first thing to be done, Lorith saw, was to find a means to keep the army from finding the laboratory that he found. Was what Peothil himself had been trying to do, but by simple error even an apprentice enchanter could recognize he had only succeeded in destroying himself. Lorith was able to take what he had learned from Dalek and apply it to Peothil's enchantments quite successfully. The laboratory was never found or even detected by the reform. Much time passed in the 480th year of the First Era. The great Aldin Dairini won many battles against the Elysian horde, and many passages and routes that had once been closed are now open. Lorith, now no longer young, was able to return to Dalek. When at last he found his way to his master's old hovel, he saw candles of morning lit in all of the trees surrounding. Even before he knocked on the door, he met old fellow student Uthrak. Lorith knew that Dalek had died. It was only a few months ago, said Uthrak after embracing his friend. He talked of you every day, of every year you were away. Somehow he knew that you had not preceded him to the world beyond. He told me that you would come back. The gray-haired man sat before the fire and reminisced of the old days. The sad truth was that they both discovered how different they had become. Uthrak spoke of carrying on Master's work, while Lorath described his new discoveries. They left one another that day, each shaking his head, destined to never see one another again. In the years ahead, before they left the mortal world to join their great teacher Dalek, they both achieved their desires. Uthrak went on to become respected, if minor enchanter, in the service of Clan Dairini. Lorith took the skills he had learned on his own and used them to fashion the Balak Thurum, the Staff of Chaos. My boys, the lesson is you. Wait, my boys, the lesson is you have to learn from a teacher to avoid those small but essential errors that claim the life of such self-taught enchanters as Peothil. And yet, the only way to become truly great is to try all the possibilities on your own. And Snowball read the final lesson, which apparently was part of this, which is odd. Have a good day. Bye-bye.